Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into a genuinely fascinating intersection. Think about it. The battlefield is the ultimate pressure cooker, right? And it turns out the strategies forged in that intense environment are actually incredibly effective in the modern corporate boardroom. Let's be real, business today is incredibly volatile. Tech is shifting constantly, supply chains are snapping, competitors are literally emerging overnight. So to navigate all this chaos, we're going to look at frameworks that were tested under the highest stakes imaginable and see exactly how they can revolutionize your own organizational leadership.
So what can history's greatest generals actually teach today's CEOs? It's a pretty provocative question, and honestly, the answer is quite a lot. Now, just to be clear, we aren't talking about treating your employees like foot soldiers. No way. We're talking about translating really complex, battle-tested military doctrines into actionable, engaging leadership lessons. Whether you're the CEO of a massive corporation or just leading a small startup team, these concepts can totally help you thrive amidst all the chaos and uncertainty. To really set the stage for us, check out this insight from the legendary Prussian general and military theorist Karl von Clausewitz. He wrote, "Rather than comparing war to art, we could more accurately compare it to commerce, and it is still closer to politics." That is absolutely crucial. He's brilliantly framing strategy not as some rigid academic science, but as this dynamic bridge between high-level policy and ground-level tactics. Basically, both war and commerce are fundamentally just conflicts of human interests.
All right, here is our mission briefing for today. First up, strategy under maximum pressure. Second, mastering the OODA loop. Third, intuition and decisive action. Fourth, empowerment through mission command. And finally, extreme ownership and resilience. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. Strategy under maximum pressure. Because, let's face it, the landscape of modern business is honestly becoming just as complex and unpredictable as the fog of war.
You might be wondering, why look to the military at all? Well, strategic decision-making in warfare is literally one of the most unforgiving environments imaginable. The stakes in war, human lives and national sovereignty. The stakes in business, financial loss and ruined reputations. Now, because those stakes in war are so absolute and so directly felt, the military has literally been forced to develop the absolute most robust frameworks for reasoning sensibly under intense time and resource constraints. It is literally the perfect testing ground for high-stakes problem solving.
Moving right along to Section 2, mastering the OODA loop. This is all about navigating uncertainty like a pro.
Let's talk about the OODA loop. It was developed by U.S. Air Force Colonel John Boyd, and it stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. Now listen, it is a massive mistake to view this as just some simple step-by-step checklist. It's actually a continuous, highly iterative process. You observe the environment, orient yourself to the new reality, make a decision, and then act. And guess what? That action changes the environment, which forces you to observe all over again. The real competitive advantage here isn't just about rushing through these steps. It's about superior adaptability and learning. But here's a fascinating detail. The absolute most vital phase of this entire loop is orient. In a business context, we call this your organizational orientation. See, observation just brings in raw data. But your organization's orientation, meaning its culture, its leadership, its incentive systems, that dictates exactly how that information gets filtered, interpreted, and ultimately used. If your corporate culture is rigid, well, your orientation is flawed, and your decisions are going to be flawed too. A true competitive edge comes from an agile, highly tuned organizational orientation. Section 3. Intuition and Decisive Action. Let's step back in time for a second to see how high-level vision actually translates into action out in the field, especially when you don't have perfect information.
If we track the evolution of strategic intuition, there's a really fascinating pattern. Back in the 1800s, Napoleon totally dominated Europe using what the French called coup d'œil, which basically translates to a sudden flash of insight, a strategic glance that just cuts right through the fog of war. Clausewitz later codified this in 1832, noting that great commanders rely on this rapid discovery of truth. Fast forward to 1944, and we see General George S. Patton relying heavily on this exact same type of expert intuition to make incredibly rapid pivots during World War II.
Patton had this famous saying, "A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week." He totally understood that in complex environments, you were never going to have all the facts. Never. Now, obviously, we aren't suggesting you literally execute a marketing plan violently. But waiting around for a perfect plan, that is absolutely a trap. Leaders have to trust their strategic intuition, put together a good enough plan, and just execute it forcefully, tweaking things on the fly.
And this creates a massive clash between traditional corporate planning and military intuition. Traditional sequential planning tries to break everything down into these predictable, linear steps. To find the problem, generate 5 solutions, put them on a matrix, pick the winner. But come on, real-world business is rarely that neat, right? Strategic intuition, that coup d'oeil, is about leveraging your deep experience to see a viable path forward amidst total chaos, and then committing to working out all those little details as you go. It's a dynamic process, not a static one.
Which brings us to Section 4, empowerment through mission command. Because how do you actually get a massive organization to act with that kind of dynamic intuition? You do it through mission command. This is a core principle used by NATO and top militaries around the world. The absolute crucial element here is centralized intent with decentralized execution. Think about a typical bureaucracy. They give orders dictating exactly how to do a task. But in mission command, leaders give a crystal clear picture of what needs to be achieved and why it matters. That's the commander's intent. Then, they completely decentralize the execution. They trust their well-trained teams to exercise disciplined initiative and figure out the how completely on their own. Gerald Dwight D. Eisenhower was an absolute master of this leading up to D-Day. He actually kept a paperweight on his desk that said, "Gently in manner, strong in deed." Eisenhower didn't lead by beating people over the head. He was a true collaborator. He actively gathered dissenting voices, built a shared understanding across all the Allied forces, and set a unified command intent. By doing all that meticulous, collaborative prep, he fully empowered his frontline commanders to adapt and overcome when the actual invasion, inevitably, deviated from the original plan.
All right, Section 5, extreme ownership and resilience. Because let's be honest, even with the best intents in the world, things are going to go wrong, and your team's culture will be tested.
Former Navy SEALs Jocko Willink and Leif Babin coined this incredible term, extreme ownership. This is the foundational mindset that a true leader takes 100% accountability for the outcomes in their domain, period. There's no blaming the market, no blaming the vendors, and definitely no blaming subordinates. The philosophy argues that there are actually no bad teams, only bad leaders. If the team fails, the leader has to put their ego aside, own that failure, and look inward to figure out what they need to do differently. Maybe it's communicating clearer, training harder, or securing better resources.
So how does this actually translate to the corporate world? Well, consider the software company Intuit. Resilient teams don't just magically happen. They are bound together by a highly visible common purpose. Look, during times of extreme strain, people naturally just want to hunker down and focus on their own survival. Intuit fought against this by using a really simple one-page document that constantly aligned their mission, values, and metrics. By consistently reinforcing this vision, the leaders made sure their decentralized teams never lost sight of the ultimate strategic goal.
Another really powerful way to operationalize this resilience is through General Stanley McChrystal's framework known as the 3E model, or Ship, Shipmate, Self. It is the ultimate hierarchy of accountability. If you want to sustain victory over the long haul, every single team member must understand that the success of the overarching mission, the ship, always comes first. Then comes the success and well-being of your peers, your shipmates, and finally, your own personal ego or advancement, self, comes dead last. Embedding this specific culture of accountability is exactly what keeps organizations moving forward when they're under heavy fire.
So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this final thought. Take a hard look at your own organization. Are you trapped in rigid, sequential planning, or have you built an agile culture that relies on clear intent, extreme ownership, and strategic intuition? Seriously, ask yourself, is your team prepared to execute a good plan violently tomorrow, or are you sitting around waiting for a perfect plan next week? Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope this gave you a really powerful new perspective on leading your team.